All right, welcome to Property Perspectives. I'm your host, JG Kemp for 5 Star Realty. Today we have attorney Will Broneill.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. Good to see you. Want to introduce yourself?
Hey there. My name is William Broneill. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for over 22 years. Presently, with the firm of Gahan Kerensky Capicella in Vernon, KKC Law, and I've been there for a couple of years.
Okay. At Vernon.
Vernon, yes. So my primary responsibility is handling real estate transactions.
Is it really?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, you had your own practice on more point, no?
I did, yes, for 18 years. So I started in the business. I was with the small firm for 2 years in Manchester. I was on my own for 18 years. My dad was an attorney as well. He had a solo practice, so we were kind of in the same building. So we practiced sort of parallel to each other, but had our own businesses.
That's great. So you followed your dad.
Yes.
What'd your dad do? What type of law did he go?
General practice.
General practice.
Yep.
Okay, so what is, for anybody that doesn't know, what is general practice?
It's a wide, you handle a wide variety of matters. Typically, you're kind of like somebody's family attorney. You try to do their closings and their wills. If they get in a car accident, maybe you handle that. It's harder and harder to do that because all of life is becoming more specialized. Because you really need to be able to keep up on a lot of things in order to do that.
Right. I mean, it's almost like business. You should try to concentrate on one thing, right?
Yep.
Because that will make you more professional in that aspect. So you're trying to bounce around.
Yeah, but it's really given me a broad exposure to a lot of different things because even real estate touches a lot of things, probate and bankruptcy and litigate, all sorts of different things. So it really has given me, a breadth of knowledge. So I think it's good. I'm glad I would have done it different way, I guess.
Well, that's great to know. So what made you go into real estate law?
So when I started, it was about a third of my practice. The thing that, I know that my dad liked about practicing law, and I do as well, is like working with people. And, what better way to work with people than on the sale or purchase of, typically
It's gratifying.
Exactly. So
It can get complicated too at times. What I think is one of the most complicated cases you ever had.
with real estate,
Yeah.
generally, so we do, we back up, I guess. So my, my current practice, I handle anything from purchase and sale of a single mobile manufactured home up to multi-million-dollar commercial real estate. Sort of our bread and butter is, residential closings, owner-occupied stuff. But we do a fair amount with investors, and that's where things get a little different, I would say, at times with wholesaling and flipping and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the wholesale thing could be kind of tricky.
Yep.
Yeah, especially when you have to put your real clause in, skate clause, in case things don't go right.
Right. Exactly.
So, 22 years?
22 years. 2002, I was admitted.
2002. Wow. Okay. So that means you did, what, 6 years? 7 years of college?
4 years of college. I took a year off. 3 years of law school.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And where'd you get your law degree from?
Western New England.
That's what I thought. What's this?
Springfield.
Gotcha. You didn't go too far from home.
No, I commuted from Manchester during law school.
Yes, aren't you? Yeah, I know you are a heavy cross-country runner.
Yep. In high school and college.
Yeah, you're very good at that. In college, too.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Still...
Yeah, D1. I do not participate in running so much anymore.
Oh, you don't? Yeah. Gotcha. All right. So, 22 years experience. Pretty sure you've seen a lot on that 22 years experience. So you left your own firm. Why'd you choose KKC?
The head of their real estate department was retiring, and they needed somebody for that role. that was well suited to it. And at that time, I was a little bit burnt out. My father had passed away a couple years prior.
Okay.
And it was sort of lonely being alone. So this gives me an opportunity to work as part of the team. Um, and our firm has about 15 attorneys. So it's a larger firm for our area. And mostly focusing in their own discrete practice areas. But given my broad uh, general practice background, I do a few other things, like a bit of probate administration, estate planning, and some business stuff. Um, somebody comes, we're mostly a one-stop shop. Somebody comes to us looking to buy a piece of real estate and they want to set up an LLC. We can assist with that.
Yeah. Well, it's no surprise to me that you became an attorney. You've always been a very smart, analytical type of person. It's a lot of reading. A lot of contractual being, right?
Yeah.
Got it. So
Law school is all reading, basically.
all reading, right? I can imagine.
Reading cases.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what do you think is one of the biggest things people consistently mess up or overlook in a contract?
Yeah. So as you know, the contracts that are in use in this area for residential transactions are mostly form contracts, which is great, actually, because I know what they say, and you know the contract I'm talking about, so you know what they say. So there's not a lot of arguing about interpretation. When you get into commercial, that's typically where it's more attorney negotiated. But if the agents are taking care in filling out the contract, usually they're fine. There's sometimes some oddball situations where, let's say that parties have agreed that somebody's going to move in early or depart late after the closing, not sort of setting forth that in the contract. Other oddball things, never hurts to ask, an attorney in advance, but, most agents, there's a couple pet peeves, like, sometimes we get a contract in and, they'll list the closing date and I'll put it on the calendar. It's a Saturday or Sunday. And it sort of makes me wonder, like, if the agent wasn't paying attention to the fact that they put a closing date on a weekend, where else did they miss as they were processing the transaction? Or, sometimes they'll just fill in the name of the seller is like owner of record. That has never made sense to me. Why?
Right.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, you think they would know that. I got a cool question for you. And I've been doing this for 22 years.
Yeah.
Right? And in my 22 years, I could probably count on one hand, maybe two, how many times my closers have closed when they're supposed to.
Right.
Sometimes I think it's me. Is that typical?
No, I mean, I tell people all the time. I mean, some people, obviously, when you sign the contract, people are kind of thick. Oh, that's the closing date. Well, it's not set in stone. The language in the typical form contract says it sets forth a date, and then it says or sooner is mutually agreed by parties. But yeah, they often happen after the fact for whatever reason, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, just the general concept of contract laws, parties have a reasonable amount of time to perform.
And how much time is that? Let's say, typically after, let's say the closing date was supposed to be today. How much time do they have after that they have to close?
So it's based on the circumstances. So it's really, so what does that mean? It's whatever a judge would say if it got to that point. But, I've heard attorneys in this area say kind of the rule of thumb is a couple weeks.
A couple of weeks.
Is acceptable.
I kind of heard that a couple of weeks. Yeah. So if you wanted to close on time, you will put time of the essence.
Yeah. So that's, could be a double-edged sword though, because, the buyer could stand to forfeit their deposit if, they don't close, but there's sometimes that there's some issue on the seller side that sort of delays the ability to close. So it can be a double-edged sword.
Josh, I've seen it happen where somebody actually won what they lose their deposit. Yeah, we have consignment the essence. Well, let's talk about probate. One of my favorite things. Yeah, why do you think people are so scared of probate?
Oh, I think there's a, sort of a conception that it's complicated and it delays things and it can be expensive. And it's all relative, the time associated with things. In a full estate, typically there's a claims period of 150 days.
And so the creditors can come
Correct.
after the estate has been.
After the notice is published.
Okay.
So, at bare minimum, you're 6, 7, 8 months where you could even conceivably close a full estate.
Right.
Typically, the probate court, in the decree appointing the fiduciary, will allow a year to administer the estate, and that's also flexible. I mean, some things take longer to wrap up.
So when you say a decree, right, just for people who don't really know what probate is, so you have your first stage, which is the appointment stage, right? You tell you 1 to 2 months, and that's when you'll get your decree usually.
Yep.
Is your decree basically a letter of testamentary or a letter of administration, which is...
Yeah, so there's 54 probate courts in Connecticut, and so they're regional, so they cover certain towns, and I think each one's practices and procedures are a little bit nuanced, but in the time it can take for them to process things can depend on the court's workload. There's a couple courts in our area that had recently had judge turnover because there's a mandatory retirement age of 70 for probate. All judges, for including probate judges. Yeah.
Okay.
So the time will depend a lot of times on the court and how fast they act. But if somebody has a will, you submit certain documentation to the probate court, and the court appoints an executor, and you get a decree admitting the will to probate and a certificate of appointment, and also a document called Notice for Land Records that gets recorded on the land records. If somebody does not have a will, that's called intestate. Right. And the court, similar procedure though, you submit an application to have an administrator appointed. Notice goes to all heirs and interested parties, and court appoints an administrator. And similar thing, you have your decree, you have a certificate of appointment. Unfortunately, in those cases, when you have real estate that needs to be sold, and that's, a lot of times when you have an estate as seller, the agent will simply write on the contract subject to probate approval. Now, most of the time, if somebody has a will, there's not actually court approval that's required because the court, there's power of sale on the will. But if they die without a will, after a contract is signed, you'll have to take that contract and file a document asking the court for permission to sell the real estate. And it can be streamlined if you get all interested parties to sign, if you can get all interested parties to sign off on that. But you need the approval of the sale in a case where there's no will. And then there's an appeal period for that, which everyone can also waive. But those are additional steps that, needs to be taken if somebody had a will that would not have been necessary.
That's interesting. I didn't know that part, that there was permission to sell in the will, obviously, right? Yeah, so you still need to get approval. And is that because of like that?
Well, if there's authority to sell in the will, you don't need probate court approval to sell. You still need to have your fiduciary appointed, your executor appointed. And there's this document that's needed when a deceased had an interest in real estate called the certificate releasing liens. There's this inchoate lien for succession estate taxes and probate fee. That's the document that you need to, in order to convey clean title. Now, there's ways to kind of close and get that later, so as not to delay things. But
Gotcha. So, do you do all that paperwork for a client, or do they have to go back and forth to court themselves?
some people represent themselves in probate court. My firm has a large probate administration and estate planning department, um, with a lot of attorneys, a lot of paralegals, and so we can assist. So typically what will happen is the executor or administrator will hire an attorney to assist them with the process. They do a lot of the legwork, but we advise them and prepare paperwork. So we must electronically file most documents. So that, I think, helps streamline things. Nobody's actually going to a court to do things.
Okay.
So our office provides that.
That's good to know.
That service.
I've seen attorneys where they actually had clients go through the full worth, not do it.
They can. I mean, again, like there are costs associated with it. So if a client is fee sensitive, they may wish to do it themselves. Some of the probate courts are helpful. Like, say a relative dies, you go in and say, what do I need to do? And they'll give you a packet of papers that need to be filled out and sort of an explanation. And some people take that and run with it, and other people just get overwhelmed and don't think that it's something that they can handle. In my office, most of that work is done by paralegals, actually, which is good because they deal at lower rates, the attorneys, and they are very efficient in gathering the information and keeping things moving along and answering clients' questions. And, they have forms and processes in place in order that enable them to efficiently move things along.
So what's the best way for someone, that was a two-parted question. What's the best way for someone to stay out of probate? Or what's the best way for somebody to protect their estate?
So if you listen to the radio, you may hear a lot of advertising about living trusts.
Right.
So revocable living trusts, what happens is basically while you're alive, you establish a trust. And then you transfer all your assets to the trustee of the trust. Now, with a revocable trust, the trustee of the trust could be yourself. And right. And when you die, your trust document will appoint a successor. And that person is not having to go to the probate court and get appointed and can immediately sign like a listing agreement, for example, or contract and things like that. There's still some probate involvement there with a revocable trust. For whatever reason, DRS considers that an owned asset as of the date of death. So you do still need to file a document with the probate court to get this certificate releasing liens document that I mentioned.
So that's interesting to know. That's interesting to know. So as we all know, and I ask these questions because I'm in a community where they say about 85% of people in the urban center will go through probate because they're not set up correctly. So and we're going through basically the biggest wealth transfer in America right now with the baby boom.
Yes.
We got an additional, I think, 13 years before everybody pretty much passed away. And it's deep because when you really think about it, like my mother's 74. Another 13 years, she's 87. Right? And she's right on the cusp because of what it was, 1946 to 1964. Right, so a lot of these people are passing. So I definitely see it happening. So I think about people prepared as much as possible. Maybe you can elaborate what is the importance of estate planning, or estate planning attorney. How could they also
Right. So, as I mentioned, when you die without a will, um, it does make um, the probate process a little bit longer and more cumbersome. And if you have a will, it appoints an executor, and you can power of sale, things like that. Uh, Tax planning for the very wealthy. There's tax considerations that you can attack by proper estate planning. Um, Elder law and Medicaid planning of getting somebody positioned for Medicaid eligibility, Title 19 is a whole other thing. Can almost be considered a subset of estate planning.
So if somebody doesn't have a lot of money per se, does that still mean any estate planning, or they pretty much could pass it by just getting a will?
Well, correct. Or so I guess where I got off track. So I wanted to explain what happens if you don't have a will. So state law, the law of intestacy, provides what happens to your assets if you don't have a will, and it's meant to sort of approximate what you would have done had you had a will. So every situation needs to be analyzed, but typically things go to parents, lineal descendants like children, siblings. So it's meant to approximate what would happen if folks had a will. But yeah, a simple will does work for most.
And so I think that's a base step I'll take from this. So definitely get a will. Simple will is get a will, and then kind of go from there. And depending on where you are with your assets, your estate, you can make a decision, what to do next.
Yeah. So our process in our office is, when somebody comes in for a consult, is we get an idea of what they own, and what their objectives are, what their family situation is. And then we didn't even talk about this yet, but certain assets don't even pass under a will. Like if assets are jointly owned, it passes to the survivor. If there's some assets that will have beneficiary designations, like a lot of times, like retirement accounts will have a designated beneficiary, and that stuff doesn't pass under the will. So really, you got to look at the whole picture, how assets are titled and what the assets are, to sort of come up with a plan for.
That's good to know. Yep. It's great to know. So do you advocate when you buy a piece of property, putting a business name on it or keeping it under your own name, or is that something maybe you should talk to your accountant about?
What type of property? Well, if it's your home, typically you put it in your own name, or sometimes you put it in the name of a living trust.
I guess if you start buying multiple properties, put it in a trust.
LLC is sort of a recommendation.
Yep. All right. This might be kind of off subject, right? But is there a way to form an LLC and not? Because I've noticed when I go to the secretaries, this secret sauce here.
Yeah.
And you can look up an LLC, you can look up who the owner is, who the agent is.
Yes.
Somebody like me, I can find you, right? If I don't want to be found, how do you go about that? Do you LLC, then put the agent as another LLC? Do you do things like that?
So if an LLC is listed as a member of an LLC, then all you do is you go and you look up that LLC, and that's going to have owners. So at some point that sort of needs to end. I've had clients that have formed LLCs in different jurisdictions to be members of, that have different rules. Try to think. Delaware maybe, but what weird one, like Mexico or something like that.
Montana is always
maybe Texas. So, I mean, I've had clients that sort of have figured that out.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yep.
Well, all right. I know that I got a bunch of grinders from you a couple weeks back. You're part of the Boy Scouts.
Yep. So I have 4 children, and 2 of them are in Scouts. So,
Scouts.
Yep.
My brother said hello. He was actually part of Troop 25.
Yeah. Yep. I remember him.
If you were this, or the kids in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just a couple years younger than us, right?
Oh, yeah. He's
Awesome.
happy. Yeah, not too far fakes.
Yeah. Very smart guy.
Yeah, very smart guy. Very smart guy. Did a lot of school. But he said hello.
Great.
When I brought that up, he knows after we were.
Nice.
You also had a goal of how many books you want to read this year?
12.
12 books. And how many books you read so far?
6.
6 books from 3 months. He says for 3 months.
Yep.
How long you say? Reading.
Many evenings, not every evening, but I find it sort of relaxes me.
6 books, huh? Good for you.
Yep.
Jeez. Big. I'm at 6 for 3 months. Which is, it's a big book though.
Well, I don't get up at 5:30 in the morning and start working like you do. So,
Whoa, yeah, that's true. Yep. I guess you could see it.
yes. So I think that's a trade-off.
And hiking. You're doing a lot of hiking stuff.
Yep.
Found a lot of time for hiking.
Yep.
You did a lot of what peaks? How many peaks you did?
So there's 48 mountains that are over 4,000 feet in the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire, and climbing all 48 is a thing. And I actually had a goal to finish them all by August of last year.
So, okay. And you did?
And I did, yes.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate that. So this is Attorney Will Broneill. I really appreciate you. All right. We've done not a lot of business so far, but I plan on doing a lot of business with you. Yeah. I like how you handle your clientele. They're very responsive, and you have a great team. Yeah, they're responsive too. I highly recommend you. Yeah, 100%. You want to tell the people where they can reach you?
Yeah, sure. So online, www.kkc-law.com is our website, and that's just the best way to get us.
Yep, I really appreciate you for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason.
Sincerely, I just want to tell a quick story, because how I met you is a funny story. We went to school together. I used to be in remedial classes, and my mother fought for me to be in college prep and advanced classes. And when she did that, I got there, and that's how I met you, Mark Miner, Neil, James Coughlin. And I actually looked up to you guys growing up. So when I say it's no surprise that you became what you become, I watched you from Mellon to now. So I'm very proud. And I really thank you for coming to sit down and talk with me. All right. So this is JG Kemp, 5-Star Realty, Property Perspectives. We'll see you next week. Thank you.